So I'm Nasser Raymond, co-CEO of Quinter Estates. I'm here with my managing partner, Payman Tayibi. He is our industry expert and our off-plan director.
Hi, everyone. A big shout out to the community. We appreciate you tuning in and looking forward to provide some insights that you don't hear everywhere on social media. Now, so let's just get started. I'm sure you brought a bunch of questions for me today.
Well, let's start with the elephant in the room, which is the current situation in the UAE.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, as you know, in private, obviously we've had counsel, but there are obviously a lot of questions. There's a lot of sort of content out there at the moment that ignores the basics and a lot of the questions that people have. So I just wanted to sort of get your industry experience. You've been in this for a very long time. A lot of investors trust you with their money. I know from speaking off camera, you've had a lot of them calling you with different amounts of questions. And I just feel like the content isn't available at the moment. Obviously, the UAE is a strong nation. They always will be. They bounced back from financial crises, oil crises, flooding, even as recent as last week. It is a resilient country. And the government has done an amazing job protecting us. But there are questions, and those questions have to be answered by somebody who has, obviously no one has a crystal ball, but I'm pretty sure you'll do to the best of your ability to give your point of view.
Thank you very much, first of all. I am really surprised, well, surprised and kind of not surprised that now you see agents out there being military experts, geopolitical experts. It's like I have agents explaining the UAE air defense system, right, in detail. Like, okay, nice. Great to hear. It's like yesterday you were selling me a property. Today you're explaining to me how missiles are being intercepted. So that's one thing that, is a bit awkward at the moment. One very important point that you mentioned is the crystal ball. Of course, nobody has that. And I've mentioned that prior, that it all comes down in how long the current situation will continue. And of course, what the solution will be, what kind of agreement will be done there, how sustainable the ceasefire or whatever will be after this is done. How long it will take? I mean, we hear every day, pretty much we hear, a couple more days, couple more weeks. And we're already in the fourth week. 1 month already passed in this city.
Just to interject, you can see our leaders of the country, they're out going about their business as usual, whether that be a mall visit or going to the Dubai World Cup. They're getting on with things, right? So I think it is on the ground, it is a lot different compared to how it's being perceived in the media. Obviously, there has always been this sort of dark cloud of everyone trying to say Dubai's going to fail and everyone's having their your moment now, like where we were right. But obviously, we're in Dubai. At the end of the day, there's intercepts overhead. Don't feel like I'm actually worried as much as other people are making out in the media. I've seen interviews of people coming back to the airport going, oh my God, it was like a war zone. My friend, if you can book a pizza to come to your front door in 15 minutes, you're not in a war zone. So that's my personal opinion. But I just feel like things have snowballed in terms of small incidents get put up on a big screen and it becomes a big incident.
We are strongly biased, right? We live there by choice. We love our life in the UAE. But also don't forget the current population of the UAE is or was 4 million, right? Last year alone, we had 19.6 million international visitors, right? So they make a huge percentage of people actually being in the money, being in the country, spending money, and of course, staying in our hotels. Dubai, in the meantime, is the number one city globally outside China with the most hotel keys of around 160,000. London used to be the number one. Now it's actually Dubai. Right? And these hotels need guests to operate. And at this very moment, what are you observing?
I'm seeing that there is in the hospitality sector, there is a slowdown, of course, because the planes aren't full, people aren't coming like they were. But at the end of the day, I think that feeds into the narrative of when there will be a ceasefire, which I'm pretty sure there will be in the coming future. I don't have a crystal ball, of course, but Dubai, for me, the fundamentals haven't changed. Payment. It's still a great place to live. You live there, I live there. It's not like you're going to just turn off that switch, the safety, the ease of getting things, the lifestyle that you have there. At the end of the day, we did a company iftar last month and we did that at the Atlantis and it was a lovely event. And then we went home afterwards and we got a missile alert on the way home and that was that. I'll even give you a story. I had a missile alert go off and in between, I decided to walk up to Spinneys and get a packet of sweets and eat those sweets on the bench and walk home because I feel so secure in what we're doing. Obviously, I know the government's doing everything they can do to make sure that we are safe, but I have full sort of understanding that they are doing the best in a bad situation. The other GCC countries are struggling under the pressure. I don't see Dubai having, or even the UAE as a whole having the same problem.
That's fantastic what you're saying, but this is very UAE focused. I prefer a different approach.
Okay.
It's like, why do people move to the UAE in the first place? Why do tourists come to the UAE?
Of course.
Right? Because the situation at home in Europe has not improved.
Of course.
Right? Given the circumstances today, given the upcoming inflation that we will face, that's inevitable. Do you believe the situation in Europe will be better? Crime in Europe will be less?
I'll give you a story. Me and my wife were walking in central London, and I had my phone out. I was on the phone. My wife grabbed my arm, put your phone away immediately. As I did that, someone rode past on a moped. They're grabbing phones. So again, it's the same sort of thing. Which lesser evil is it in Europe? You know, you're going to be worried about being robbed on the street, or you're going to be worried about high taxes and not getting the healthcare you deserve.
That's a very crucial point. But also, let's not forget, I mean, there is this picture of the safe haven that we have in the UAE that now lost its appeal or has a scratch in its image, right? How and when are we able to overcome that again? Of course, in the UK, especially in central London, your watch, your phone might not be safe, your jewelry, your handbag, or whatever. But in the end, let's also be very transparent about that. There's no rockets flying over your head.
Of course.
Right? So once we overcome that, the issues in Europe are gonna be even more, how to say that best? What is the crime in Europe or the countries outside UAE based on? It's based on
social hierarchy.
Exactly.
Lack of government funding. I guess sort of, to be honest, I'll take the UK as an example. They cut the funding to all of the social programs for kids after school. They had to go somewhere, and they've gone the wrong way, down the wrong road, and they don't have those after school clubs anymore. So I don't know. The way I look at it is, when's the last time you saw a European leader walking freely among their people and people coming over and wanting to take selfies with them and wave at them and speak to them? It's just something you don't see in Europe. Well, that was probably the weirdest thing for me when I first moved over, seeing the way, and then you, as you live in the country, you come to appreciate it. But I know what you mean. Missiles going overhead is not ideal, but it is the whole region payment. So what do you think? It's obviously the focus is on the UAE and specifically Dubai, because it is the poster city of the whole region, right?
Yeah, and I see the situation in Europe further. I'm trying to find the right words here.
Degrading, I think, is the word you're looking for.
Degrading, given the inflation that we are about to face, probably. Very simple, gas prices in the UAE are being announced monthly. So diesel was up 70%,
Yep.
and gasoline 30-35%.
I think around that
So,
right now.
so and that will of course affect anything that we consume, right? Because all consumer goods require energy and transport.
I think that
The prices will go up.
there is that old saying, right? Don't throw stones if you live in a glass house. The Western media's been having a field day for the last 30 days going, oh, well, look at Dubai, it isn't as great as they said, and look at the UAE. But I think everyone sort of missed the boat on the fact that it's going to affect everybody, right? This is, I would say this is, I would go as far as saying this is a global crisis now compared to just being a GCC region problem, right? Because energy affects everything, whether you're into the supply chain, whether you are producing something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But also, I wrote down some effects and some points that we are already observing. Number one being the demand shock. Yeah. This is the most immediate, right? What are we seeing there? Tourism is dropping. We are already observing that. Expats are delaying moves to the UAE. Of course, nobody's moving, or hardly anybody's moving here now.
The few friends that I've got, though, are still considering moving. They just want
considering.
Yeah.
But if they were supposed to move in March, did they do it?
No, they couldn't.
Exactly. And some people physically left. If they're coming back or not, that's a different question, but they left. So this is the first and immediate effect that we see, which is the demand shock, which leads to fewer buyers plus fewer renters simultaneously. And what does that do? That's a double pressure on any investment. You know, if you are a property owner renting your property, or a property owner trying to sell your property.
Yeah.
So less demand at same supply levels.
With a smaller pool of potential tenants, of course.
Exactly. Potential tenants, potential buyers, and all of that. So that definitely affects the prices in the short term. That would be number one. So that demand shock is already happening. We can observe it. You have right now already way better chances to rent an apartment at a discounted price, even more than purchasing an apartment at a discounted price.
I think the prices of rent go before the price of the actual property, right?
Exactly, because you can also see holiday homes being significantly more affordable than they have been pre-conflict, especially in prime areas.
So a quick question, sorry to interject. It's just you've got a lot of short-term Airbnb owners at the moment.
Yeah.
Now, like you said, hotels are struggling and they're offering staycations to residents,
Mhm.
which is some amazing deals, right? If you want to stay in some of the nice hotels. But
Exactly.
the short-term market has disappeared for them. So what do you foresee in your area of experience that they would have to do then? There could be
So
forced sellings, long-term
we have
rents.
different scenarios. The question is, what is your Airbnb strategy? Is it you renting a bunch of apartments and subletting them in form of Airbnb, or is it that you own them and they are externally managed? Now they might have a negative yield. How do you have a negative yield? So every property in the UAE and the service charges are being carried by the owner,
Of course.
right? Usually you include it into the rent, but the service charge per se is being paid by you as the owner.
So the nearest scenario to this would have been COVID, right? And obviously
Exactly.
the UAE government done it properly. They shut everything down. They cleaned the streets.
Mhm.
And they were the first to open, the first ready to be open to the world. And that was a great example of them recovering. But during that time, how did the Airbnb market sort of wane against the problems of COVID? Because I think that'd be the nearest example, right?
It is the nearest example, but also there was one major difference. COVID was a global dilemma, was a global black swan.
Well, one could argue that with fuel prices going the way they're going, that this could be a global issue again, right?
Well, economically it is.
Yeah.
But in terms of, and this is my second point that I have wrote it down, that the safe haven narrative has broken in the UAE.
Would you say that's mainly for people who don't live in the UAE? Would you say that that would be across the board for some?
It affects both. It affects both because we hear those interceptions as well. I haven't seen any rockets. I haven't seen a drone yet, but I've heard missiles being intercepted. I've received the missile alerts on my phone and all of that. And I've never experienced anything growing up in Europe, growing up in Germany. I've never experienced anything like that.
I guess it is quite scary, right, when it first starts. But I found after the first 2 or 3 days, it becomes a sort of understanding that you follow the rules, you do what you need to do, and you're inside for that period, right?
Yeah, you have to. But this safe haven narrative is being stress tested at the moment.
It's been stress tested, but listen, for somebody who sees the UAE as a big sandpit and has never stepped foot in there, and they've seen a load of people from their country leave that are obviously of probably the upper 2 or 3% in wealth go to a place, and then they see that this is happening. They're like, oh, it was never safe anyway. But for us as residents, when you live there, it's just different. You know, you don't that for me is still the same. It's just I understand this is sort of a black swan event, probably the word I want to use. You wouldn't expect it to happen, right?
Not to that extent, for sure. No, but as you can see, the government was prepared for it.
Of course,
right?
More prepared than others, I like to say.
One more effect that we see now is a transaction freeze. Means like that the price discovery stops and buyers are waiting, sellers are unsure, deals are falling apart.
Okay.
Yeah, which is quite normal. We will see those numbers in, I'd say, 4 to 8 weeks when
But
the statistics come out.
you still have some people that sign contracts, right? So those would still be honoured if you signed contract A and B.
Yes, they would be on it. They would be on it. But yeah, as we know, like off-plan deals can take 3 to 6 months to transact.
Yep.
So a lot of numbers that we have seen in February, those deals have been done before.
So they only show when the 24% is paid or when the OCUD is registered?
Yes, when the OCUD is registered. Exactly. With off-plan properties is the OCUD, and with secondary properties or established homes is once a title deed is transferred.
Could you explain what OCUD is, just for people watching that?
Yeah, sure. So OCUD is basically the pre-title deed. OCUD, you would receive an OCUD instead of a title deed in 2 scenarios. So number 1 is when the property is still under construction. Number 2 is if you have a post-handover payment plan on it and haven't fully paid the property. It's not on mortgage, is a debt towards the developer. Then you would still have an OCUD until the property is paid off, either by the bank or by you.
Perfect.
So we see that. And well, one more point to say, like, how do you see the job situation?
Job situation,
in the UAE?
I've heard pay cuts for some people. And I've also heard that some people in the hospitality sector have been laid off because obviously it's tied to tourism. But I don't know. I'd want to say this with a pinch of salt, but during COVID, I was in business at that time. And at that time was a small business. So you saw, it's one for a better saying, but it's a very English saying. When the tide goes out, you see who's been swimming without trunks, right? So a lot of businesses run with 1 to 2 months cash flow. We're now seeing that interact in the market because I take it, like you said, it is like I said earlier, it's a black swan event.
Mm.
So people won't have the money in the bank to keep their business going. And that's very unfortunate, of course. But I've seen initiatives from the Sheikh himself.
Already starting.
He's starting. They've already, as the UAE always does, it's bounced back into action. They've put a billion dirhams into the economy to make sure that there is initiatives for businesses to get funding.
Yeah, no, but I see one major difference again to COVID. In COVID, especially for the hospitality and tourism sector, is like there was no alternative. You could not have shifted easily somewhere else. Whereas now the European summer is on its way. So it's very accessible for hospitality professionals to make a move back to Europe and earn good money in the summer seasons.
Mhm.
So that is one threat that I'm definitely seeing. Real estate is the same. I mean, it's getting quite challenging for real estate companies. But then also, and we mentioned that before, with over 9,000 real estate agencies in Dubai alone and almost 100,000 agents, it's maybe about time that this market
I think there is a lot of
optimizes.
optimize. I think there's a lot of agents that, like you said, there's something you were saying in your trainings, which is very good. How many
Mhm.
deals were done in a year and how many deals per agent, right? So there is a lot of, for want of a better word, extra fat, right, in the market in terms of people that aren't given the right advice, etc., etc. Now, I've always believed that this job is a consultative approach. You're a consultant. You're not a broker. You're consulting a client on the
Mhm.
best way to invest their money or the best way to invest in a family home. So I feel like it became more about fees than it did about the actual experience for the person investing or the
Absolutely.
end user, right? And I think that process always beats fees. It should always be a pleasant experience. And it got to a point now where I think people in the UAE got fed up with getting constant broker calls from people saying the same thing rather than actually giving tailored experience and having a consultative approach.
So let's try to be different.
Of course.
Talking about being different, let's also discuss the supply wave. I mean, there were talks and rumors of oversupply even pre-conflict.
Of course.
How do you see that now, once the conflict happened? And of course, I'm going to share my thoughts with you.
Pre-conflict, look, I've seen people, whether they be friends or people I know through other people, off-plan became a sort of get rich quick scheme. I'm going to basically get to the point where I can sell it to someone on a mortgage and hand over. And while you always teach us that obviously measured investment is the best approach, some people obviously have gone in and bought something hoping that they can give it to a mortgage buyer. So if that, my question to you, apologies, I know you asked me a question, but my question to you is what happens to these people that have bought 2 or 3 properties without the means to buy them at the end, as in get a mortgage or finish the payments? Because there probably are quite a lot of those flippers. You know, it's like anything in COVID. I think luxury watches and sort of supercars was the same thing, right? People were just trading them. I think
Mhm.
like people were trading Pokemon cards like when we was children. So it's the same sort of thing. What's your view on that?
No, I mean, obviously, investors that are or did over leverage are now in a critical situation. So this is where you can obtain those so-called distressed deals. But also don't forget, I mean, I have seen a lot of overpriced property especially in the off-plan market pre-conflict.
Yeah.
So these buyers, they would struggle now big time. So even purchasing a property that was pre-conflict already 20% below OP, the original price, you can now easily expect to get these for 30, 40% below original price, which still necessarily wouldn't make them an outstanding deal.
So what about the developers that were overpriced as it was?
Yeah.
Are those going to see the really harsh sort of corrections?
Finally, these buyers will see the true face and the true value of their property. Because pre-conflict, it was like, okay, the market grew 50% in 3 years. Your property made 30% because you, underperformed the market, but you were still happy. You said, hey, your agent was like praising themselves, like, hey, Mr. Investor, you made 30%. If it was leveraged, you made maybe 60% on equity, right? Whereas if you would have chosen the right property in the right developer, the right unit in the right project, you could have made 100% on equity, right? Today, these weaknesses will be exposed, right? So if you had bought something, and this is why many of my investors that bought like 1.5 years ago, even if the market now goes down 20, 25%, they're still doing okay. Of course, it's not pleasant, but they will not face huge losses because they bought their property not at market price. We discovered undervalued gems in the market and we positioned them accordingly.
So I think this is the problem. Some people want to buy fruit and veg and they expect not to have a bad batch in the fruit and veg, right? So it's the same sort of mentality.
Kind of, yes. I'd say that. If you like what you have heard today and would like to get more from us, make sure to like and subscribe and tune in again.
If you would like to speak to Payman about something specific, you can ask a question below and he'll personally answer himself.